How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the many interpretations of the series where eventually I will probably get to your favorite dinosaur. Today we are looking at one of my favorite dinosaurs, Pachyrhinosaurus, an incredibly cool ceratopsian that I just need to praise for a minute. I, of course, have this Beast of Mesozoic Pachyrhinosaurus figure that is absolutely gorgeous, and this is what I'm going to use to show how awesome Pachyrhinosaurus is. First of all, it has the very basic ceratopsian build, a very stout body with very interesting looking feet. The lens is over there, Evan. Interesting looking feet, a relatively short tail, and the most notable thing is, of course, the animal's skull. Look how awesome that skull is. This figure represents Pachyrhinosaurus lacustae. There are, of course, three species, lacustae, Pyrrhotorum, and Canadaensis. The one that you see portrayed the most is lacustae, and I think it's mainly because of these horns right here. Lacustae is often distinguished by having those three horns, or the number varies, but those horns at the base of its frill. But probably the most notable thing about Pachyrhinosaurus, and of course this applies to all three species, is this boss. That's this massive bone right here, right on its nose, essentially. That is the coolest thing about Pachyrhinosaurus, and one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite dinosaurs ever. Just remember how important that boss is. It's gonna be important later on. So of course I have everything pulled up, and we shall get right into it. Our first depiction will be Dinosaur Message in the Stone, and immediately you see why I said to remember the boss. So there's going to be quite a few depictions that apply basically saying that the boss was the support for a horn. And that was not the case with Pachyrhinosaurus. Analysis of that boss didn't found that there was any evidence for such a support. There was a group of scientists early on who did propose the idea that maybe it supported a horn. Yeah, no, that's not the case. So unfortunately, we will see that quite a bit, and it's going to be a little bit painful to see, but the first one right here. Other than that, everything else looks pretty good. It's a decently shrink-wrapped design, but the horns, or the spikes on its frill, look really good. And just the overall skull shape, I think, looks fantastic. Next up is the Dinosaurs, the PBS show in 1992. Once again, we have a horn, very reminiscent of kind of earlier depictions of Elasmotherium horn. Basically just huge, massive. They kind of like, they emphasize how massive, like say if this was the support of the horn, it would be a pretty big base, and then that means it would be a really big horn. So that's the logic behind that. Other than that, once again, the rest of the skull looks really good. I think the body looks pretty decent. I mean, it's of course, again, shrink-wrapped, but I think for the most part, it captures Pachyrhinosaurus pretty well. And then after that, we have the Land Before Time, and yes, no horn this time. We have Mr. Thicknose. He is, it's a pretty cool addition in the Land Before Time series. I remember seeing him when I was a kid with no knowledge of Pachyrhinosaurus whatsoever, how foolish I was. But he has a pretty cool stylized design. It kind of looks like they moved the boss up to the middle of his forehead rather than being on his nose. I mean, I assume that this kind of like gray patch right here represents the boss. That just makes the most sense for me. So in terms of the skull shape and everything like that, it doesn't really match up, but it's a very cool stylized Pachyrhinosaurus. Then we have Disney's Dinosaur, which has a great looking Pachyrhinosaurus. We only get to see it a little bit. It unfortunately gets demolished by the kaiju-sized Carnotaurus, but I think that it looks really good. It does represent lacustae. It has those horns. The boss, I think, looks really cool and kind of stylized in its own way with some extra added keratin on top of it, which I think was a nice touch. The colors, I think, look solid. A kind of like dull green color moving into the lighter brown color. It looks great. It looks fantastic. I think Disney's Dinosaur has fantastic dinosaur designs, and Pachyrhinosaurus is definitely one of them. Then Jurassic Fight Club, we revert back to the old ways and we give it a horn. Boo. No good. Boo. We were doing good. We had some bosses, but we're back to the horn. And even at that, the skull I don't think matches up too decently well. Like, it's a little bit short. It's right in that way, as in it's a little bit short, but the frill doesn't look too great. It's just all around, it's not a great design, which is no true surprise. There's quite a few things wrong with the documentary, but yeah, that's not a fan. Not a fan of that one. Nova Arctic Dinosaurs. We're back. We got a boss. We got a boss. The boss on its nose. Very important. So I don't think that there was too much of a budget placed into the dinosaur designs, so they're pretty undetailed, all things considered. It just gets the basic idea of Pachyrhinosaurus down, and that whole basic idea, I think, looks pretty good. I can tell that it's meant to be Pachyrhinosaurus, so I think it was a success. Then we have King Kong 2005. So there is a ceratopsian that is encountered by the group in a deleted scene. It was in a deleted scene. You can see it in like drinking the water in like a passing moment too. Now, this isn't officially Pachyrhinosaurus in universe. It's called Pherocutis cerastus. I hope I said that right. But you can definitely tell there was some influence taken from Pachyrhinosaurus. Or if I'm being completely honest, you can tell there was some influence taken from several different ceratopsians. But the whole lore of Skull Island in 2005's King Kong is that the dinosaurs that appear are highly evolved from their initial counterparts. Take, for example, the V-Rex. It's known as V-Rex instead of T-Rex because it's not technically T-Rex, it's just highly evolved from T-Rex. But with the same logic of why I included V-Rex in my T-Rex video, I'm going to include Pherocutis cerastus in my Pachyrhinosaurus video because why not? I think it looks kind of interesting. So it really does fit the style of of Skull Island, like that kind of very terrifying and gnarly style. You could tell that it has several adaptations to help it survive on this very brutal island. But you can see a boss right here, like a little bit of a boss, which is the biggest reason why I think it has some influence taken from Pachyrhinosaurus. Also, the way that skull looks, that frill, the top of the frill, those two horns that kind of go into each other, kind of reminiscent to the way the Pachyrhinosaurus looked. So I think it's cool. I think it's extremely stylized. It has these two type of nose horns going out to the side. Kind of reminds me of a later design that'll be showing up. I'm not a big fan of that all around, but all in all, I do think that this is a cool one, and I wish we got to see more of it in the final movie. Maybe. I don't know. That movie was pretty long. I'm sure people would have been tired of creatures by that point. Same with those giant piranhas. That is a deleted scene that I recommend you check out, though. Then we have Dinosaur King, and unfortunately, it has a horn. I will give it some credit. Like it definitely looks like this horn is made out of keratin, which of course dinosaur horns would have been layered in keratin anyway. So I don't know what I'm trying to accomplish with saying that. But, the horn is truly unfortunate. I do really like the colors, though. The colors are very cool. This very striking dark blue color with the greenish blue for the frill that helps it pop. I think that's cool. So it's very, as per usual, it's stylized for that Dinosaur King style, but just included with the horn, which, come on, man. A boss is unique. It's interesting. We need more boss. Then we move on to March of the Dinosaurs. Really cool documentary in general. I think it's a very fun idea for a documentary. We do encounter a Pachyrhinosaurus herd that looks great. I think that I mostly like the colors. It does have the boss, but I like how bright the frill is in contrast with the rest of the body. The skull seems a little bit wide, but I do think it's pretty decent. Not really too many complaints with that one. Then we'll move on to the 2013 Walking with Dinosaurs. I did a whole review on this movie, and my whole consensus is that the dinosaur designs are really good. The talking, not so much, but the dinosaur designs are fantastic. The Pachyrhinosaurus in particular, they look great. I really like the way that they look. It kind of looks like they mixed the three species together in a few areas, but for the most part, I think they did a solid job. I especially love how they took the time to individualize each of the designs. Like, these guys do look different from one another, and I think that's really cool to see. I think the colors are fantastic, and the overall texturing and quality of the CGI I think looks great. That is a success. I highly recommend watching the documentary version if you're able to find it, because that's the better version. Then we will move on to the Jurassic franchise. Now, first, I will start off with Sinoceratops. Why am I starting off with Sinoceratops, may you ask? Because I have heard many sources that this was intended to be Pachyrhinosaurus at first, but they changed it because they gave it a horn. They had the horn on the Pachyrhinosaurus, and they changed it to Sinoceratops to justify the horn, essentially. And as far as I can tell, looking at this overall design, I think I believe that. The skull does seem to match up to Pachyrhinosaurus pretty decent. I mean, it's a bit big, but it seems to match up pretty well, especially considering the fact that you have these horns at the base of the frill, which it implies that they were intending on portraying lacustae, but instead they gave it a massive horn. So That's annoying, but it is renamed to Sinoceratops now. But I think that the initial intention was that it was meant to be Pachyrhinosaurus. There are rumors that Pachyrhinosaurus will show up in Chaos Theory. I hope that's true. That'd be really cool to see. If they don't give it a horn, of course. Just don't do that and we'll be fine. But on top of that, we do have quite a few designs in Jurassic video games. The first is in Jurassic Park 3 Park Builder, which gives it this really cool orange coloration, very striking. It looks like those horns on the, or those spikes on the frill kind of curve really low down, which is really fun to see. And it has the boss, epic victory right there. And yeah, that one's pretty cool. Then on to Jurassic Park Builder, it doesn't really emphasize the boss too much, but they didn't give it a horn, so that's awesome. And then in Jurassic World, the game, again, the boss isn't necessarily emphasized, but no horn is present, so still a success. Until you get, of course, to the level 31 to level 40, then they kind of give it a horn. Oh well. And then in Jurassic World Primal Ops, the game that didn't really get the chance to survive, this looks fantastic. If this was truly in the game, then this is probably the best one that the Jurassic franchise has made so far. I really like it. I mean, the boss isn't as emphasized, but you can definitely tell that a boss is there. No horn, portrayed lacustae. The frill looks fantastic with those little circles, kind of patterns going on. The green color, I think, looks really slick. That's a fantastic one right there. Jurassic World Evolution 2 obviously has one, and this looks great too. They gave it kind of like a higher shoulder, which doesn't really bug me too much. I think the skull looks fantastic. Those horns on the frill look really great. The spikes look awesome. The boss is a little bit more emphasized, but I think it looks really good. And a lot of the colors that you can give it, I think, look fantastic as well. I also like how there's kind of these bumps right here that can be taken as like the larger scales, something that ceratopsians do have, where it's just they kind of have larger scales randomly throughout the body. So very cool attention to detail, and this is a great design. And that does it with the Jurassic franchise. We will move on to Amazing Dino World, and we're back. Return of the Not So King. They definitely gave it very Elasmotherium, like old Elasmotherium depiction horn for the boss again, kind of basing it on the thought process that that boss is a foundation for a horn. So that's not great, but the rest of the animal in true fashion looks pretty good. Looks in comparison to the real life animal. Like it matches up pretty decently. I need to get words out. I mean, I like the designs on the frill and whatnot. It's just that horn that holds it back, unfortunately. Moving on to Dead Sound's Dinosauria, and what do you expect from Dead Sound? These look beautiful. These look incredible. The whole episode, Our Frozen Past, is dealing with a cooler environment, which is something you don't typically see dinosaurs in, which I always love seeing. Of course, the last one did it too, and so did Arctic dinosaurs. But this looks really great. He gave the Pachyrhinosaurus kind of like woolly feathers, and again, this is why I say watch the behind the scenes. He does mention why he decided to do that, because he does mention the fact that feathers on Pachyrhinosaurus are pretty unlikely, but he thought that stylistically it would be really cool to see only feathered dinosaurs throughout the whole short. And I agree. I think that was a really cool stylistic choice, and I think it looks really cool here, especially how they're kind of sparse, like they kind of end on the back of the animal. Skeletally, the whole animal looks really great. The skull looks fantastic, and that boss is really cool. Really no notes. I think it's a great design. Moving on to Prehistoric Planet, we have another great design right here. Everything matches up very well. I especially love the texturing because we get some pretty good close-up shots of it. The texturing looks really good. Like the overall CGI model just looks great. We also see some younger ones with stubbier features, and they opted for quills, basically kind of basing it off of Psittacosaurus, the small ceratopsian that has quill-like structures. So that's certainly a different design flair, but the head has relatively brighter colors compared to the rest of the animal, and the bosses do vary in size, obviously applying some keratin covering, which likely would have been present on the animal. So this one looks very good, and the only disappointment with the overall portrayal is how easily they kind of go down against the Nanooksaurs. I mean, really big, hulking ceratopsian probably would have put up a little bit more of a fight. Of course, the animal was probably tired, but still, it would have been cool to see, basically. Then we will move on to the rest of our video games, starting off with Fossil Fighters. It looks really cool. It looks like they're portraying lacustae, of course, because you have those horns on the base of the frill. Notice how they didn't apply the horns to the boss. Great job. But the boss is present. It's a little bit more raised on the animal's nose. You can see the differences in the textures. It also has some stars on it. Probably a cool little in-game thing. And the green colors are very striking. I think it's a really cool one. Then we will move on to Ark Survival Evolved. You know, I do know that this is not an official species of Pachyrhinosaurus. In fact, I'll actually look at the fictional species that this represents. My eyesight is terrible, so I hope I read that right, but it says it's Pachyrhinosaurus mudisora, I think. If I'm wrong, be sure to correct me. And they've opted for kind of shifting the boss into the center of the forehead, which honestly, I'm going to be completely honest with you right now, I think looks a bit odd. I mean, it's probably in reference to Pachycephalosaurus that has a bump on its head. I mean, I don't know the whole thought process behind designing it, but in terms of the design, I'm not a big fan of it. I don't really like it. I also don't really like these horns that come out basically where the nostrils are. But what I do think is really cool is how I can tell that it's meant to be Pachyrhinosaurus. So that's cool. I mean, they didn't give it a massive horn, is what I'm saying. So that's a win right there. But all around, this is, it's not a terrible design. Don't get the wrong thing from me. It's just not really for me. But we'll go ahead and move on to Prehistoric Kingdom. And all of them look great. All of the different models you get to have look fantastic. Their colors look great. The texturing looks incredible. The skeleton shape matches up very well. Their sounds are great. Everything about it is just great. They do give you the woolly option, and that's probably just, of course, feathers, this type of feathering is unlikely on ceratopsians. At the very least, we haven't found really any direct or conclusive evidence on it for something like that. But it's still really, stylistically, I think it's still really cool. Basically the same thing back to Dead Sound's video. I think stylistically, I think it's a really, really fun thing to see. I should also mention that in Path of Titans, there is a mod being worked on for Pachyrhinosaurus. It will instantly become one of my favorite mods. It looks beautiful. Everything matches up very well, and I just can't wait to play it. Now, the Roblox game Prior Extinction, and geez, man. Seriously, Prior Extinction hasn't even come close to disappointing me yet. When I say that they have some really solid designs, like models of their dinosaurs in their game, I absolutely mean it. Look how great this looks. So everything matches up. This skeleton shape looks really good, really solid. A lot of these colors that you can give them are really popping and really cool. And of course, the boss is extremely emphasized, which I think is always awesome. So all around, Prior Extinction has just another great model right here. I also had to bring this up right here. It seems there was a Jurassic Park toy that was released, I believe, in 2010 that gave it a horn that kind of splits off into two different directions. You can never escape the horn. It's only a matter of time before we see a new depiction that gives it a massive horn on that boss. And by that point, I'll be sad. But I will say that the newest Pachyrhinosaurus toy, the most recent one to come out, looks great. Like, if it looks like this in Camp Cretaceous, in Chaos Theory, or even if it looks like the Evolution one, then I think that it'll look really great in that show. I mean, here's to hoping anyway. But there we have it. That is a good portion of the many interpretations of Pachyrhinosaurus. This was, of course, a very fun one to make. Pachyrhinosaurus is one of my all-time favorite dinosaurs, as I mentioned earlier. So it was really cool to kind of just break out the figure and just talk about how incredibly awesome this dinosaur is and how unfortunate it is that so many portrayals give it a massive horn. Because look at that. Pachyrhinosaurus does mean thick-nosed lizard, and while it's not a lizard, it does have a thick nose because of that boss. But aside from those few portrayals, we did get some really good depictions that honestly I think did the animal justice. So again, this was just a very fun one to make. The next video, I won't be putting up a poll because of course we were doing that whole bracket type thing, tournament thing, if you will. So next up will be Alamosaurus, which is probably one of my favorite sauropods, so I'm really excited to see that. Kind of a lesser known dinosaur too, and while it doesn't show up in too much media, it still does show up in media, so I think it's fair to do it a video. Just because, here's the thing. Just because there's not a lot of depictions of a dinosaur or prehistoric animal doesn't mean it shouldn't get featured. If this video, if one day we have a many interpretations of video that is only 5 minutes long, then it's 5 minutes long. That's just the way it is, because I hope that this is a series that can last for a while and we can cover as many creatures as we possibly can. And dinosaurs like Alamosaurus, I certainly think, should get the chance to have the spotlight. But anyway, that's pretty much all I have for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have an awesome day.